Welcome back to the deep dive. So I think if you've got an IELTS speaking test coming up, you know that feeling, right? That kind of unique dread.
Oh, absolutely. It's this high stakes 15-minute conversation that feels so subjective.
Yeah, and you have to talk about what everything from your favorite childhood toy to, I don't know, the future of public transportation. The gap between a band 6 and a band 9 can feel like a total mystery.
It really can. But what we found in our sources is that the strategies to get those top marks, a 7, an 8, or a 9, are actually incredibly learnable.
And it's not about what most people think it's about.
No, not at all. It's not about having some perfect British or American accent, and it's definitely not about rattling off a list of fancy vocabulary words you memorized.
So our mission today is pretty simple. We're going to extract the exact strategies that separate that mid-range score from someone who sounds truly confident and high level.
And the core insight we kept finding is that the real secret to a band 9 is to stop acting like you're in a test.
That's it, isn't it? Just have a conversation.
Exactly. So we're going to dive into the hidden traps that trip people up, and then the actual techniques for part 1, part 2, and part 3 that will make you sound natural and, well, impressive.
Okay, let's do it. Let's start with part 1. This is supposed to be the warm-up, right? The easy get-to-know-you questions.
Right. But the goal here is tactical. You want to make a great first impression, obviously, but the most important thing is to get yourself to relax.
Because if you're relaxed and fluent in part 1, that momentum just carries you through the whole thing.
It's a huge advantage. And this is where we see the first major trap: memorized answers.
Ah, yes. The student who has a perfect pre-written monologue about their hometown.
Exactly. And they think it's a great idea, but the examiners, they are trained to spot this from a mile away. It sounds like cheating to them.
Okay, I get why they see it as cheating. It's supposed to be a test of spontaneous communication. But why does a memorized answer actually make you sound worse? I mean, if the vocabulary is great, shouldn't that help a bit?
That is such a good question because it gets right to the mechanics of what fluency is. The problem isn't the words themselves, it's the delivery.
How so?
Well, when you recite something, you're not actually building the language in your brain in real time, you're just retrieving a file. And because you're not thinking, you lose all the natural parts of speech.
Like what, specifically?
Crucially, the little pauses, the ums, the brief hesitations that signal you're actually thinking, a high-scoring student does that naturally.
Right.
But when you recite, you also lose the natural stress and intonation. The rhythm gets weird. It's too fast, too flat. It's like you're a robot reading out loud.
So you go from sounding like a thinking human to a high-speed audio file.
Yeah.
And that just screams unnatural no matter how good the facts are.
Precisely. You can hear it. There's one example of a student who just launches into this prepared speech about Dubai being the most populated country in the GCC and facts about the Burj Khalifa. It sounds so strained.
And you compare that to...
You compare that to the student talking about growing up in Delhi and, my mom is from Bombay, my dad is from Kerala. That one feels real. It's personal. The voice has life in it. It just signals genuine conversation.
And that leads right into the second big trap in part 1, which is giving these incredibly long answers that go way off topic.
Yes. The student feels like they have to cover the entire history, culture, and famous food of their city in one go.
And the result of that is the examiner has to keep interrupting you.
Constantly. And then the student gets stressed. They think, oh no, I'm failing, or this examiner's so rude. But they don't realize the examiner has to ask between 9 and 12 different questions. They're just trying to stay on schedule.
Right. They need to see you handle a range of topics, not just one.
Mm.
So, okay, what's the Band 9 strategy here? I know our sources mentioned this Saigon insight.
The insight was that students were speaking great natural English before class started, but the second the test began, they switched into test mode and their scores dropped.
So the strategy is, don't do that.
Basically, yes. Speak naturally, like you're chatting with someone you just met at a coffee shop. High-scoring students, they answer the question directly, and then they just add a little bit more detail.
And that little bit could be a quick explanation or an example or a tiny personal story, not a Wikipedia entry.
Exactly. There was a great example of a student asked about their weekend routine. The answer was just so simple and direct. Yes, 100%. Weekdays are for work. Weekends, I get to do whatever I want.
Direct answer, brief reason why, and done. Perfect.
It's clear communication, not recitation. And that sets you up so well for the real pressure cooker, part 2.
Right. Let's move on to part 2, the infamous cue card. This is the part that just strikes fear into so many people. 1 minute to prepare, 2 minutes to talk nonstop.
And the big mistake here, the common trap, is something we can call bullet point slavery.
I like that. So they see the 4 bullet points on the card and feel like they must answer number 1, then number 2, then 3, then 4, in that exact order.
Yes, like it's a mandatory checklist. But what happens if one of those points is just impossible for you? The card is describe a special meal you prepared, and one bullet is how did you feel? And all you can think is, I felt hungry.
You're completely stuck. And if you run out of things to say on that one point, after like 20 seconds, the panic just sets in.
Total panic. Your fluency just collapses. That rigid structure is actually what limits you because it forces you to talk about things you might have nothing to say about.
But hold on, if the bullet points are there to guide you, isn't it kind of risky to just ignore them? What if the examiner actually needs you to cover those specific things?
See, that's the key misunderstanding. That's what holds people back. The examiner is marking your ability to speak fluently and comprehensively about the main topic. The bullet points are just suggestions. They're like training wheels.
Ah, okay. So a Band 7, 8, or 9 student focuses on the main prompt, the big idea, and they use those 2 minutes to bring in what you call comfort points.
Precisely. Comfort points are those related details or stories that you can talk about easily. You're basically steering the conversation towards your own strengths while staying totally on topic.
Let's use that Paneer example because it shows this perfectly. The main topic was just, describe a time you prepared food. How did that Band 9 student turn that into 2 minutes of amazing English?
By layering complexity, they didn't just list ingredients. First, they brought in their own lifestyle. I'm pescatarian, so I often prepare this. Right away, that's great vocabulary used naturally.
I see, so it's personal context.
Then they mentioned using a specific ingredient, Reiji flour, because they have a gluten intolerance.
Wow, okay. So they're demonstrating this specialized, almost technical vocabulary, pescatarian, gluten intolerance, but it doesn't sound rehearsed at all because it's part of their story.
Exactly. And then they even talked about the nutritional content of the dish, which is a great way to make the topic more abstract. And they finished with serving suggestions, like adding Greek yogurt.
So they hit on descriptions, personal background, abstract connections. None of that was guaranteed to be on the cue card, but it was all perfectly relevant.
And it was 2 minutes of sustained, fluent, complex speech. It transforms part 2 from a test into a demonstration.
That is a brilliant pivot. You're not tricking the test, you're just using the English you actually have to communicate, which is the whole point.
And that flexibility becomes even more important when we get to part 3 with those really difficult abstract questions.
Yeah, things like discuss the regulations on online advertising or the pros and cons of buying versus renting property.
And for a lot of people, the first impulse when they hear a question like that is just surrender. To say, I don't know, or just freeze.
Which is the ultimate trap.
It really is,
Yeah.
because when you do that, the examiner can only conclude one of 2 things. Either you're just exhausted or your English ability has hit its ceiling.
Yeah.
And either way, your score plummets.
But here's the secret, right? The big aha moment. If you get a really, really hard question in part 3, it's actually an exceptionally good sign.
It's the best sign you can get. It means the examiner already thinks you're at a band 7, 8, or maybe even a 9. They're throwing you the hardest question they can think of to see if you're an 8 or a 9. They wouldn't bother if they thought you were a band 5.
That changes everything. That reframes the challenge from a threat into an opportunity. So the strategy is simply always try to answer.
Always. Even if you know nothing about the topic, remember, this is a speaking test, not an IQ test. So if they ask about AI in education, you can just acknowledge it.
You could say something like, I'm not an expert on AI algorithms, but I imagine that while it could replace some tasks, it probably can't replace something like human empathy in a classroom.
Perfect. That shows incredible language command, even with limited knowledge. Now, for the questions you do have an opinion on, you need a blueprint, a way to build a long, insightful answer.
And that's this 4-step structure. I think this is so useful for building out a Band 7+ response.
It is. It gives you a roadmap.
Yeah.
So, step 1 is simple. Directly answer the question. Just state your main point clearly.
No waffling, just get to it.
Exactly. Then, step 2, explain why. Give your reasoning. Why do you think that?
And step 3 is where you make it real. Back it up with an example. A short story, something you read, a personal anecdote. It makes the abstract concrete.
And then, step 4. This is the real high-level move. Develop the point further. This is where you might show the other side of the argument or talk about a future implication. It shows you can think flexibly.
It's basically a mini argument structure you can build on the spot. Like that student who was asked about the skills a great chef needs. They didn't just say patience. They explained why patience is important, gave examples, and built on the idea.
Right. It's organized, it's deep, and it's high-level communication. It stops you from just giving a one-sentence answer and then stopping dead.
So if we pull all of this together from part one all the way through part three, what's the one thing that connects all of these high-scoring students?
It's that when you listen to them, it doesn't feel like a speaking test anymore. It just feels like you're having a normal, interesting conversation.
They're managing their stress, they're steering towards things they know, and they're using the English they have in a really natural way.
They're not using tricks or hacks, they're just communicating, which, is how you get the highest score possible. It's about managing the conversation so you can show what you can really do.
So the final thought for you listening today is this.
hmm
If you want that band 9, you have to practice speaking naturally above everything else. Your prep has to feel like a real conversation.
Yeah, if you don't practice actual communication, real back and forth exchanges, none of these techniques are going to stick on test day.
The real work isn't just memorizing vocabulary lists. It's practicing the skill of having a great conversation, even when you're under pressure.
And using that skill to get the score you deserve.
Something to think about until our next deep dive. Thanks for listening.